Hi, VencoreWeather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Tuesday, August 8th. Well, some activity in the tropics right now, as expected as we head through the month of August. Climatologically speaking, this becomes more and more of an active time of the year, peaking sometime in the middle of September. Tropical storm Franklin right now is sitting over the Yucatan Peninsula region of Mexico. It will move on over the southwestern Gulf of Mexico over the next day or two and then slam into Mexico, perhaps reaching hurricane status. I think there's a pretty good chance that it could reach hurricane status over the next 24 to 48 hours or so before it makes landfall in Mexico. And we'll talk about some of the reasons why over the next couple of minutes. Meanwhile, there's another wave, a tropical wave over the central Atlantic. It will encounter some difficult environmental conditions for strengthening over the next 48 hours or so. However, by the upcoming weekend, it'll move into the western Atlantic, and I think conditions will become a bit more favorable for strengthening, so it'll continue to have to be monitored over the next several days. It could come fairly close to the U.S. East Coast, perhaps even strengthen into tropical storm or hurricane status over the upcoming weekend into the early part of next week. Likely will turn away before ever reaching the U.S. East Coast, but again, that system has to be monitored closely over the next several days. Here is Tropical Storm Franklin right now over the Yucatan Peninsula region. It will continue on a westward track over the southwestern Gulf of Mexico and then slam into this part of Mexico, northeastern Mexico, in a couple of days. And again, I think it could very well strengthen into hurricane status before it makes landfall. Here's that next wave to watch. It's not named right now. It's too weak to be named at this particular time. Again, it will encounter some difficult environmental conditions over the next 48 hours, but once it gets into this region right here, very well could strengthen during the weekend or the early part of next week, perhaps even into tropical storm or hurricane status while in this position. Likely turns away before ever reaching the U.S. East Coast, but of course that has to be monitored over the next several days. Well, here's a map from the National Hurricane Center of these two tropical systems. Right here, Tropical Storm Franklin right now, sustained winds at 45 miles per hour. Tropical storm right now, not even that close to hurricane status. However, once it gets out over the southwestern Gulf of Mexico, it very well could strengthen. Water temperature quite warm in this part of the Gulf of Mexico, warmer than normal, and we'll look at that in a moment. So it could strengthen into hurricane status before it moves into the northeastern part of Mexico. Meanwhile, out here, the National Hurricane Center is giving a low chance of formation into tropical storm status over the next 5 days. However, I think once it gets into this region right here of the western Atlantic, north of the Bahamas, by this weekend, early next week, it has a chance of strengthening into tropical storm status, perhaps even into hurricane status, so it'll certainly have to be monitored. Likely turns away before ever reaching the U.S. East Coast, but, of course, too close to call at this particular time. Well, here's a look at the current sea surface temperature anomalies in the Caribbean, the Gulf of Mexico, and the western part of the Atlantic Ocean. Virtually everywhere that you see yellow is slightly above normal temperatures for this time of the year. So in other words, Franklin, right now situated right in this region right here, will move over very warm waters of the southwestern Gulf of Mexico before making landfall into Mexico. And again, that could allow it to strengthen into hurricane status before making landfall. Again, it slams into Mexico in probably about 48 hours or so. Meanwhile, that wave out in the central Atlantic will also encounter some warm waters as it gets to the western Atlantic north of the Bahamas by the weekend. So it certainly could encounter difficult conditions over the next 48 hours or so, but by the weekend, the early part of next week, some warm waters here in the western Atlantic could allow it to strengthen into tropical storm, perhaps even hurricane status as it comes closer to the U.S. East Coast. Again, early indications are that it will likely not make landfall in the U.S., turning away before ever making landfall, but too many days to say for sure. It's just too close to call on that right now. There is a possibility, an outside possibility in my opinion, that it completely falls apart over the next couple of days, and if that happens, it won't even allow for the possibility of strengthening in the western Atlantic this weekend. I don't think it will completely fall apart, however, over the next couple of days. Well, let's take a look closer to home. A very comfortable week for the Mid-Atlantic region and much of the eastern half of the nation. Cooler than normal conditions this morning here, Tuesday morning. Comfortable conditions all week long. High temperatures even in the I-95 corridor region from D.C. to Philadelphia to New York City, closer to the 80-degree mark than the 90-degree mark, which is very comfortable for this time of the year, early mid part of August. Deep upper level low situated in the 500 millibar levels of the atmosphere, again below normal heights and below normal temperatures. One of the things I like to look for increased chance of a U.S. landfall and hurricane is high pressure building up in southeastern Canada, and once that happens, the clockwise flow around that high pressure will cause some east to west movement of tropical systems down here across the southeast U.S. to Bahamas. So high pressure, not low pressure, up in this particular part of the country is always a little bit of a red flag in the tropical season. And let's move forward to see when that actually develops. It does develop, but not until later in the month of August. Let's move ahead in 6-hour increments here. And here we go, still blues showing up basically across the eastern half of the nation into the midweek time period. Relatively normal here, no blues or oranges in the Mid-Atlantic region later this week, but still nothing in terms of excessive heat. Still have below normal heights across the Great Lakes. Here we are now, Friday time frame. Let's keep moving forward here. I just want to show that we still have below normal heights over the weekend here in the Great Lakes and spilling over to the Mid-Atlantic region, and that continues to move to the south and east, sitting right on top of the region at the middle of the month. This is now a week from today, Tuesday, August 15th. Likely below normal temperatures for much of this week and even going into next week here in the northeastern U.S. And it's not until about a week after this that you start to see oranges build up here in the southeastern part of Canada. Yet another system pushes some below normal air. This is the end of next week. Now we're talking about Saturday, August 19th, and here we go. Then at this time, here we're talking about Monday, August 21st, which, by the way, happens to be the Great American Solar Eclipse Day. High pressure ridging setting up here over southeastern Canada. That is a red flag for potential tropical activity to make it to the U.S. East Coast. Again, clockwise flow will bring movement in this fashion towards the East Coast. So this is something to look for the latter part of the month, perhaps the 20th or 21st on. We may get high pressure ridging setting up here across southeastern Canada. Again, this time of the year, that's a red flag for tropical activity and in terms of landfall in the U.S. But the next wave to look at is right now over the central Atlantic. It should not strengthen too much over the next couple of days, but we'll have to watch it over the upcoming weekend as it comes closer to the U.S. East Coast. It could strengthen into tropical storm or hurricane status. Early signs are it will not make landfall in the U.S., but it's too close to call at this time. Meanwhile, we have Tropical Storm Franklin headed towards Mexico, perhaps as a hurricane over the next couple of days. That's it for now. For VencoreWeather.com, I'm meteorologist Paul Dorian.